Commander Vex Lar of the Trizalian fleet stood frozen, mandibles twitching in what his species recognized as utter confusion. Before him, covered in the bright orange blood of at least 6 Krell warriors, stood the human. The same human who had been introduced merely 3 solar cycles ago as just a medic. Just a medic. What in the 7 moons of Calthornia happened here? Vexlar finally managed to sputter, his dual voice boxes creating a harmonic yet horrified tone. The human Marcus Holloway looked down at his blood-soaked uniform, then back up at Vexlar with an expression that seemed almost apologetic. There was a situation, Marcus said, shrugging his shoulders in that peculiar human way. I handled it. You handled it, Vexlar repeated, his optical membranes dilating to take in the carnage around them. 6 Krell warriors, each one nearly twice the size of the human, lay in various states of dismemberment across the medical bay. You are supposed to be putting bodies back together, not taking them apart. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck, another strange human gesture that Vexlar had yet to fully decipher. Yeah, about that. Turns out medical knowledge is pretty transferable. Transferable to what? Mass murder? I prefer the term defensive medicine, Marcus said with a grin that displayed far too many teeth for Vexlar's comfort. Vexlar's antennae flattened against his head, a signal of extreme distress among his kind. He stepped carefully over a severed Krell limb, trying not to slip in the pool of viscous orange fluid. Explain. Now. Marcus sighed, wiping his hands on a relatively clean portion of his uniform. They came in through the ventilation shaft. 6 of them, all armed. I was treating Lieutenant Garza for that plasma burn when they dropped down. They didn't notice me at first, too focused on the medical supplies, I guess. The narcotics, Vexlar nodded. Krell were known for their addiction to certain pain medications. Right. So I grabbed a scalpel and... A scalpel? Vexlar interrupted, his voice rising to a pitch that would be embarrassing in any other circumstance. You killed 6 Krell warriors with a scalpel? Marcus looked almost offended. Well, not just the scalpel. After the first 2, I used a bone saw for the big one. Then that weird laser thing you use for cauterizing wounds came in handy for number 4. The last 2. He glanced at a dented oxygen tank in the corner, got a more creative treatment. Vexlar fought the urge to vomit, a reaction his species had evolved as a defense mechanism against toxins, but now seemed perfectly appropriate for this situation. Humans are supposed to be the pacifists of the Galactic Alliance. Your planet isn't even in the top 50 for military technology. Marcus laughed, a sound that sent chills down Vexlar's spine ridges. Yeah, funny story about that. We don't need fancy tech. We have been killing each other with sticks and rocks for thousands of years. You get good at improvising, but you are a medic. Yeah, Marcus nodded, suddenly very serious. And they threatened my patience. For the first time, Vexlar noticed the protective barrier Marcus had somehow erected around the recovery beds. Lieutenant Garza and 3 other crew members were safely behind it, looking equally parts terrified and impressed. You have to understand something about human medics, Commander, Marcus continued. His voice dropped to a dangerous rumble. We spend years learning exactly how bodies work, where all the vital organs are, which vessels carry the most blood, which nerves cause the most pain when severed. All so we can avoid those things when healing. He paused, looking down at his blood-covered hands. But that means we also know precisely where to cut if we need to do the opposite. Vexlar took an involuntary step backward. That's practical, Marcus finished for him. Now, if you will excuse me, I need to clean up and check on my patients. Could you send someone to dispose of these bodies? Oh, and I will need to requisition new medical supplies. improvised with quite a few of them. But before Vexlar could respond, the ship's alarm blared. The voice of his second-in-command crackled through the communication system. "Commander to the bridge. We have detected multiple Krell vessels approaching. This appears to be a coordinated attack." Vexlar looked at the carnage in the medical bay, then back at the blood-covered human who was already calmly washing his hands as if nothing unusual had happened. "Dr. Holloway," he said carefully, "I may require your unique services elsewhere on the ship." Marcus turned, a strange gleam in his eyes that made Vexlar's exoskeleton tighten instinctively. "Just point me where you need me, Commander." "I took an oath to do no harm, but fortunately for us all, that oath has a self-defense clause." As they hurried toward the bridge, Vexlar couldn't help but wonder what other surprises this just a medic might have in store. The corridors of the Stellar Vanguard had never seemed so long to Vexlar. His forelegs moved in perfect coordination as he raced toward the bridge, constantly aware of the human keeping pace beside him. For a biped, Marcus moved with surprising efficiency, barely breathing hard despite their rapid pace. Status report: Vexlar barked as they entered the bridge. His second-in-command, Officer Zix, turned all four of her eyes toward him, mandibles clicking in agitation. "3 Krell warships, Commander. They have already deployed boarding vessels. We have breaches on decks 4, 7, and 9. Security teams? Engaging, but they are outnumbered. These aren't random raiders. This is a organized strike force." Vexlar hissed, a sound that expressed both frustration and determination in his native tongue. "They must have picked up our cargo signature. The medical supplies we are transporting to the Proxima colony. Exactly what Krell addicts would risk their lives for," Marcus murmured. Every head on the bridge turned toward the human, many noticing for the first time the orange blood still staining his uniform. Officer Zix's mandibles clicked rapidly, the Trazalian equivalent of a gasp. "Commander, why is the human medical officer covered in Krell blood?" "Because apparently," Vexlar said dryly, "humans have a very broad definition of medical practice." The ship shuddered violently, throwing several crew members off balance. Vexlar grabbed a console to steady himself. "A direct hit to our starboard stabilizers," reported the tactical officer. "Shield integrity at 73%. Another voice cut through the chaos. "Commander, a security team on Deck 7 is down. Krell forces advancing toward the armory." Vexlar felt his fourth heart begin to beat, a sign of extreme stress in his species. If the Krell reached the armory, they would have access to weapons that could breach the bridge in minutes. "Divert all available security personnel to protect the armory," he ordered. "Lock down all." "I can get there faster," Marcus interrupted. The human's face had taken on an expression Vexlar couldn't quite read. "Your security teams will be coming from the upper decks. I can take the maintenance shafts directly to level 7. "You? Alone? Against a Krell strike team?" Officer Zix's translator couldn't fully convey her disbelief. Marcus smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "I won't be alone. I will have the element of surprise." He glanced at Vexlar. "And I will need to make a quick stop at the medical bay on the way." Something in the human's tone made Vexlar's antenna quiver. "What exactly are you planning, Dr. Holloway?" "Nothing that violates the Geneva Convention," Marcus replied cryptically. "At least I'm pretty sure it doesn't. The guidelines get a bit fuzzy during alien invasions." Before Vexlar could demand a clearer explanation, the tactical officer called out, "Commander, we have 14 minutes before they reach the armory." Vexlar looked at the human, really looked at him. Behind those strange, round eyes with their single pupils was something ancient and dangerous. Something that didn't align with the peaceful reputation humans had cultivated since joining the Galactic Alliance. "Go," he finally said. but maintain communication at all times. Marcus nodded, already moving toward the exit. And, Commander, you might want to secure the bridge. Things are about to get messy. The next 12 minutes were among the longest of Vexlar's considerable lifespan. The bridge crew worked feverishly to repel the Krell vessels outside while monitoring the boarding parties rampaging through their ship. Meanwhile, Marcus's voice occasionally came through the comm system, offering brief, cryptic updates. In the medical bay, gathering supplies. 3 minutes later, entering maintenance shaft D7. These are narrower than I expected. 2 minutes after that, I can hear them approaching the armory. At least 8, maybe 10. Going silent now. Then nothing. The bridge fell into an anxious hush, broken only by the beeping of consoles and the distant thuds of the battle raging outside. Vexlar watched the security feed from the corridor outside the armory. 8 Krell warriors, each standing over 7 feet tall with their characteristic black chitinous armor, were attempting to override the door controls. "Where is he?" Officer Zix whispered. As if on cue, something dropped from a ceiling vent behind the Krell. Something human-shaped but obscured by what appeared to be bed sheets. What in the name of the 7 nebulae is he wearing? Someone on the bridge gasped. Vexlar leaned closer to the screen. The human had wrapped himself in white medical sheets, with some kind of clear mask over his face. In one hand, he held what looked like a canister. In the other, "Is that a bone saw?" Officer Zix asked, her voice rising in pitch. Before anyone could answer, Marcus threw the canister. It burst among the Krell, releasing a cloud of gas. The warriors turned, weapons raised, but almost immediately began to stagger and claw at their breathing apparatuses. Anesthetic gas, Vexlar realized aloud. But why the sheets and mask? The answer became apparent moments later when Marcus ignited something in his hand, a small emergency flare. The gas cloud erupted into a blinding fireball, engulfing the disoriented Krell. The makeshift protective gear Marcus wore barely shielded him as he ducked behind a support beam. What followed was something Vexlar would have difficulty reporting in his official log. The human moved through the flames like some vengeful spirit from ancient mythology, wielding medical instruments with the precision of a master assassin. The bone saw severed limbs, a laser cauterizer blinded sensitive Krell eyes, and something that looked suspiciously like a defibrillator was used in ways its manufacturers had definitely not intended. "But by the stars," whispered Officer Zix, her 4 eyes wide. "He's not fighting them. He's performing surgery. Aggressive surgery." Within minutes it was over. The corridor outside the armory was littered with Krell bodies in various states of dismemberment. Marcus stood in the center, his makeshift protective gear smoldering in places, the bone saw dripping orange fluid onto the floor. He looked directly up at the security camera. "Armory secured," he said simply. "I could use some help with cleanup. Also, does anyone know if Krell biology allows for organ donation? Seems a waste otherwise." A stunned silence fell over the bridge, broken only when the tactical officer reported, "The Krell vessels are retreating, Commander. All 3 ships are breaking orbit." Vexlar wasn't surprised. If the boarding parties had managed to send any transmissions back to their ships, the Krell commanders had likely decided this particular prize wasn't worth the cost. "Dr. Holloway," Vexlar said into the comm system, trying to keep his voice steady, "return to the bridge immediately." As the human made his way back, Vexlar turned to Officer Zix. "Contact the Galactic Alliance Council. I need to speak with the human ambassador urgently." "Sir?" "Yes, sir." "I need to know," Vexlar said quietly, "exactly what else the humans haven't told us about themselves." And I need to know why a species supposedly devoted to healing sends their medics into space with the combat skills of elite assassins. The bridge doors slid open, and Marcus walked in. He had discarded the burned sheets and somehow found time to change into a fresh uniform, though a smudge of orange blood remained on his cheek. He smiled pleasantly at the bridge crew, many of whom instinctively backed away. "So," he said casually, "I hear the Krell decided to leave?" "That's good news." Vexlar studied the human carefully. "Dr. Holloway, I believe you and I need to have a conversation about your qualifications." "Of course, Commander," Marcus replied with that too-many-teeth smile. "But first, might I suggest we check on the wounded? After all, I am a medic who had just single-handedly eliminated an entire Krell strike team using nothing but medical supplies and terrifying knowledge of xenoanatomy." Vexlar suppressed a shudder. The human alliance suddenly seemed much more complicated than he had previously believed. 3 solar rotations after the Krell attack, Commander Vexlar sat in his private quarters, staring at the communication screen with mounting disbelief. The human ambassador, Director Prisha Kapoor, gazed back at him with a serene expression that did nothing to soften the impact of her words. "I'm afraid I don't understand your concern, Commander," she said, her voice pleasant but firm. "Dr. Holloway acted entirely within the parameters of his training and your ship's defense protocols. He protected your crew and secured your vessel." Vexlar's mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation. "Director Kapoor, with all due respect, your medic slaughtered 14 Krell warriors using nothing but medical implements. He turned a bone saw and anesthetic gas into weapons of mass destruction." "Improvised medical implements," Director Kapoor corrected, as if this minor distinction somehow mattered. "And I believe the final count was 16, not 14. The security footage you sent shows he disabled 2 more near the pharmaceutical storage area." "That's precisely my point." Vexlar's voice modulator strained with the effort of not screaming. "Why does a medical officer possess these skills?" The human delegation assured the Alliance Council that Earth has moved beyond its violent past. That humans are primarily scientists, diplomats, and healers now. The Director Kapoor's smile never wavered. "Bah! And that's entirely accurate, Commander. We are scientists, diplomats, and healers. Dr. Holloway is a trauma surgeon specializing in emergency medicine. He graduated top of his class." "From what?" "Some secret military academy?" "From Johns Hopkins Medical University," she replied calmly. "A prestigious civilian institution. I assure you, his training was entirely medical in nature." Vexlar felt his third stomach churn uncomfortably. "Then explain to me, Director, how a civilian doctor managed to neutralize 16 elite Krell warriors without any formal combat training." For the first time, a flicker of something amusement, perhaps, crossed Director Kapoor's face. "Commander, have you ever inquired about the nature of human medical training?" "I know, why would I?" "Perhaps you should. Human trauma surgeons regularly deal with the most catastrophic injuries imaginable. They learn to work in chaotic environments, make split-second decisions, and perform complex procedures while exhausted. They memorize the location of every vital organ, blood vessel, and nerve cluster in dozens of species." She leaned forward slightly. "Now consider this. Humans evolved as persistence predators on a death world filled with apex predators. We spent thousands of years perfecting the art of turning ordinary objects into lethal weapons before we ever developed formal medicine. Put those 2 skill sets together in a high-stress situation, and—" She spread her hands in a gesture that needed no translation. Vexlar's antennae drooped. "You are telling me that all human medical personnel are potentially this lethal?" "Oh no, not all," Director Kapoor assured him. Dr. Holloway is exceptional even by our standards. His file indicates he grew up in a region called rural Alaska, a particularly unforgiving environment, and served with Medicine Sans Frontiers in several conflict zones before joining the Alliance program. And you didn't think this information might be relevant to include in his personnel file? It's all there, Commander. Perhaps not explicitly spelled out, but she shrugged. We assumed it was understood. After all, most spacefaring species know about humans. The communication ended shortly thereafter, leaving Vexlar with more questions than answers. He made his way to the medical bay, determined to confront the human directly. He found Dr. Holloway hunched over a microscope, examining what appeared to be a slide of Krell tissue samples. The human looked up at his approach, offering a friendly nod that Vexlar no longer found reassuring. Commander, good timing. I have been studying the Krell physiological responses to our standard anesthetics. Fascinating stuff. Did you know their nervous system has redundant pathways? That explains why they kept moving after I severed their primary neural cords. Next time I will need to. There won't be a next time, Vexlar interrupted sharply. Dr. Holloway, I have just concluded a most illuminating conversation with your ambassador. The human straightened, his expression shifting to something more guarded. I imagine Director Kapoor cleared things up? Cleared up? No, complicated. Absolutely. Vexlar moved closer, lowering his voice despite the empty medical bay. Tell me truthfully, Doctor. Are you actually a medical officer, or are you some type of human special operative placed on my ship under false pretenses? Marcus looked genuinely surprised. I'm absolutely a real doctor, Commander. Board-certified in trauma surgery and emergency medicine, with additional qualifications in xenobiology. I have spent 12 years in medical training and practice. And the combat skills? Not combat skills, survival skills, Marcus corrected, plus a solid understanding of anatomy and physiology. You'd be amazed how transferable those are. Vexlar wasn't sure he believed this distinction, but before he could press further, the ship's alert system activated. Not the blaring alarm of a direct attack, but the softer pulse indicating an incoming distress signal. Bridge to Commander Vexlar came Officer Zex's voice over the communication system. We have received an emergency transmission from the Galactic Alliance outpost on Helios Prime. They are under attack. Krell again? Vexlar asked. No, sir. Tuxerin raiders. The outpost reports multiple casualties and requests immediate medical assistance. We are the closest vessel with appropriate facilities. Vexlar glanced at Marcus, who was already moving, gathering supplies with practiced efficiency. The human's face had taken on that focused expression that Vexlar now recognized as profoundly dangerous. Set course for Helios Prime, maximum speed, Vexlar ordered. Dr. Holloway, prepare your medical bay for incoming wounded. And if the Toxarin are still present when we arrive? Marcus asked, his voice neutral but his eyes sharp. Vexlar considered his options. The Toxarin were notorious for their brutality, worse than the Krell in many ways. They didn't just raid, they tortured, experimented, and desecrated. Their attacks on medical facilities were particularly vicious. Then we will take all necessary measures to protect the outpost personnel, Vexlar said carefully, including deploying all available medical resources. Marcus nodded once, understanding perfectly. I will prepare for both scenarios, Commander. As the stellar vanguard accelerated toward Helios Prime, Vexlar found himself in the unexpected position of hoping they would arrive after the Toxarin had departed. Not for his own safety, but for the raiders. Because the alternative, unleashing Dr. Marcus Holloway on them, now struck him as almost unconscionably cruel. The outpost on Helios Prime came into view 6 hours later, its once gleaming white structures now marred by scorch marks and structural damage. Two Toxarian vessels hovered nearby like predatory insects, their distinctive barbed hulls unmistakable against the planet's azure atmosphere. "Scan for life signs," Vex-Lar ordered, standing rigid on the bridge. Officer Zix manipulated the controls, her four eyes blinking in sequence as she processed the data. Multiple life signs detected in the outpost's lower levels. Approximately 24 Alliance personnel, vital signs unstable in many cases. And she paused. At least 30 Toxarin life signatures throughout the facility. They appear to be systematically working their way down to the medical center. Vex-Lar's mandibles tightened against his face. That's where the outpost would have moved their wounded. The Toxarin are hunting them. Correct, Commander. And the outpost's automated defenses are offline. Your senior medical officer is sending updates. Officer Zex looked up. All four eyes widened in distress. The Toxarin are harvesting organs and nerve tissue from the wounded. They are not even waiting for victims to die first. A cold silence fell over the bridge. Even for the Toxarin, known for their biological experimentations, this was extreme. Options? Vex-Lar asked his tactical officer. We can't risk a direct confrontation with their vessels while they are so close to the outpost, came the grim reply. Any missed shots could cause catastrophic damage to the facility. And our transport beams can't penetrate their shields to extract the survivors. So we need a ground team, Vex-Lar concluded, to neutralize the Toxarin forces inside and secure the facility long enough to evacuate the wounded. The tactical officer's expression conveyed his doubt. Our security personnel are trained for shipboard defense, Commander, not ground assault against Toxarin raiders. We would need at least 20 troops to have any chance, and that would leave the Stellar Vanguard dangerously understaffed if the Toxarin vessels attack. Vex-Lar turned toward the communication panel. Dr. Holloway, report to the bridge immediately. When Marcus arrived moments later, Vex-Lar noticed he was wearing a different uniform, still bearing the medical insignia of the Alliance, but made of more flexible material. The human carried a large medical kit that seemed unusually heavy. Dr. Vex-Lar said without preamble, the situation on Helios Prime is critical. Toxarin raiders are systematically killing and harvesting the wounded in the outpost's medical center. Marcus's face hardened. How many survivors? 24, but their numbers are decreasing as we speak. The Toxarin are working their way down to them. And how many Toxarin? Approximately 30, heavily armed. Marcus nodded slowly. I will need a transport to the outpost's upper level. I can work my way down to the medical center from there. The bridge fell silent. Even Officer Zix, normally unflappable, stared at the human in disbelief. Do you intend to engage 30 Toxarin warriors? Shen Di-Won, Vex-Lar finally asked. Not engage. Eliminate. Marcus's voice had taken on that clinical quality that Vex-Lar now found more chilling than any battle cry. The Toxarin are violating every medical ethics code in the galaxy. They are desecrating a medical facility and torturing patients under care. He opened his medical kit, revealing an assortment of equipment that looked deceptively ordinary. I took an oath, Commander. First, do no harm. But there's a corollary that's equally important. Prevent harm from being done to those who cannot defend themselves. This is madness, the tactical officer protested. Even if we sent our entire security team, your security team should remain here to protect the ship, Marcus interrupted. I will handle the ground situation. Vex-Lar studied the human, searching for any sign of fear or hesitation. He found none, only that same terrible focus he had witnessed during the Krell attack. Very well, he said quietly. Officer Zix, Prepare the transport room. Tactical. Maintain position, but be prepared to engage the Toxeran vessels if they attempt to flee. Dr. Holloway, he paused. What exactly is your plan? Marcus checked something in his medical kit that glinted metallically. Triage, Commander. I will stabilize the situation, neutralize the immediate threats, and prepare the survivors for emergency evacuation. And the Toxeran? The human smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I will be providing them with a crash course in human medical practices. Very hands-on. Unfortunately, I don't expect many to survive the lesson. 10 minutes later, Marcus stood in the transport room, medical kit slung across his back. Vex-Lar had accompanied him, still not entirely convinced this wasn't a form of elaborate suicide. The outpost's internal communication system is still functional, Vex-Lar explained. We have established contact with Dr. Tavia, the chief medical officer. She's barricaded the survivors in the lower-level medical vault, but the Toxeran will breach it soon. Understood, Marcus said. Once I have secured the facility, I will signal for your medical teams to transport down. Vex-Lar's antenna twitched nervously. Dr. Holloway, Marcus, you don't have to do this alone. I can still assemble a security team. With respect, Commander, they'd just get in my way. Marcus stepped onto the transport pad. Besides, this isn't a military operation. It's a medical emergency. And that's my specialty. As the transport beam engaged, Vex-Lar heard the human add, almost too quietly to be picked up by the audio sensors, that I'm to show these monsters what happens when you violate a human trauma ward. The next 47 minutes were recorded in the Stellar Vanguard's log as the Helios Prime intervention. Later, when Alliance officials reviewed the security footage recovered from the outpost, a new term was coined, the Holloway Protocol. Vex-Lar watched the operation unfold through the outpost's security feeds. The human moved through the facility like a force of nature, turning the Toxeran's own methodical approach against them. He separated them, isolated them, and then treated them to a condition incompatible with life. A surgical laser designed for delicate vascular repairs severed Toxeran tendons with pinpoint accuracy. Diagnostic scanners identified vulnerable points in their exoskeletons. Nanoscalpels found their way into breathing apparatuses. Bone regenerators, reversed to deteriorate instead of heal, turned load-bearing skeletal structures to powder. The most disturbing aspect to Vex-Lar's mind was the absolute silence with which Marcus worked. No battle cries, no taunts, not even heavy breathing. Just the methodical application of medical knowledge for purposes its creators had never intended. On the few occasions when multiple Toxeran confronted him simultaneously, Marcus deployed what he later described as area of effect treatments, combinations of pharmaceutical compounds that, when mixed, produced effects ranging from paralytic gases to corrosive aerosols that ate through the raiders' protective gear. By the time he reached the medical vault, 28 Toxeran raiders were dead, with the remaining 2 fleeing back to their vessels in such panic that they broke communication silence, broadcasting their terror to their comrades. The demon in white. One of them screamed in their native tongue, "It knows where to cut." The Toxeran ships departed at maximum acceleration moments later, leaving their dead behind rather than risk retrieving them. When Vex-Lar's medical teams finally transported down, they found Marcus calmly treating the survivors, his uniform once again stained with alien blood, purple this time, the distinctive color of Toxeran circulatory fluid. Dr. Holloway, the chief medical officer of the outpost, Dr. Tavia, whispered as they worked together to stabilize a critically injured patient. "What you did, how you saved us, I have never seen anything like it." "Just applying my training, Dr. Tavia," Marcus replied, his hands steady as he repaired a severed artery. A different context, same principles. 3 days later, with the survivors safely aboard, and the Stellar Vanguard en route to the nearest Alliance medical station, Vexlar found Marcus in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars. The human looked tired but unburdened, as if the events on Helios Prime were already fading from his consciousness. "The Alliance Council has sent a formal commendation," Vexlar said, joining him at the viewport. "They are calling your actions on Helios Prime unprecedented heroism." Marcus snorted softly. "Politicians always miss the point." "And what is the point, Doctor?" Vexlar asked quietly. The human was silent for a long moment. "The point is that humans don't compartmentalize knowledge the way some species do. We don't separate the healer from the protector. They are two sides of the same coin." He turned to face Vexlar. "You asked me once if I was secretly some kind of special operative. I'm not. I'm exactly what my credentials say, a doctor trained to preserve life. But that training comes with an understanding of how fragile life is, how easily it can be ended, and a responsibility to use that knowledge appropriately." "Including killing when necessary?" Vexlar asked. "Including stopping those who would harm the vulnerable," Marcus corrected. "That by any means necessary." Vexlar contemplated this distinction. "The Director of Alliance Security has requested you consider a transfer to their Tactical Medical Division. They seem quite impressed by your versatility." "Not interested," Marcus said immediately. "I'm a doctor, not a weapon. What happened on Helios Prime was a necessary response to an extreme situation, not a career change." "And yet," Vexlar observed, "you carry modified medical equipment that can be weaponized at a moment's notice. Your medical kit contains compounds that, when combined, create rather lethal results. That suggests a certain preparedness." Marcus smiled faintly. "Commander, humans have a saying, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. I hope to spend my entire career healing. But I prepare for the possibility that sometimes healing requires removing the disease rather than treating the symptoms." A notification chimed, indicating Marcus was needed in the medical bay. The human straightened, adjusted his now pristine uniform, and nodded respectfully to Vexlar. "If you will excuse me, Commander. I have patients waiting." As Marcus left, Vexlar remained at the viewport, contemplating the contradictions embodied in the human medic. Later that evening, he added a personal note to his official report on the events of the past week. "The Alliance classification of humans as a non-militant species requires significant revision. They are not the simple healers and diplomats they present themselves as, nor are they warriors in disguise. They are something far more complex, a species that has weaponized compassion. They do not separate their knowledge into categories of creation and destruction, they simply apply what they know as circumstances demand. Most concerning of all, they seem genuinely unable to recognize how terrifying this makes them to other species." Dr. Marcus Holloway saved 47 lives this week, including my own. He also ended 44 with the same hands, using the same knowledge, driven by the same principle. And the most troubling part? He sleeps soundly each night, convinced he has done nothing more than fulfill his healer's oath. Perhaps that is the true meaning of the human phrase I have often heard but never fully understood until now. First, do no harm. Not never cause harm, but rather make harm your last resort, and when it becomes necessary, execute it with the same precision, care, and expertise with which you would perform the most delicate surgery. The galaxy has much to learn from human medics, and much to fear, should we ever give them reason to classify us as a disease rather than a patient.